Y'all are behaving just like the congregation here does. Of course, you know that you're obligated now to come Sunday at 1:30. We do have the air conditioning on, but being an old building, as it is, it may get a little warmer than you like. I would suggest you not breathe so much. But if that doesn't work, oh well.
There's only fans.
Yes, we have some fans hiding around.
Can we turn these fans?
Since we are in the Lord's house, I'd like us to open with a word of prayer. Lord, we do thank you that you have given us a beautiful earth, beautiful land, lakes, rivers, streams, trees, all kinds of animals. And that you've given us the responsibility to be the stewards of this beautiful creation of yours. And so as we gather together this evening to look at some of the issues that affect areas in which we live, we just ask you to be with us, Lord, that show us ways in which we might be a better steward to take care of what you have granted to us. And so we just thank you for this opportunity, this time together. May it truly be useful for everyone. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I'm going to let you introduce our commissioner, Mike Larry.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Orange Creek Campbell United Methodist Church. For those of you who don't know, this church has been in existence since 1869, so it's a historical landmark here. And we're very pleased to stand by our plan being here tonight and have Mike Byerly, Commissioner Mike Byerly from the Alachua County Board of Commission come and talk to us about the Plum Creek project. That's all you can.
I know you can use a microphone, I'm just going to talk. Everyone can hear me okay? Go back over here. I want to start by thanking Pastor Daniels and the people of this church for allowing us to use this space. And I want to thank all of you all for coming out tonight, taking some time to learn more about this issue, which, for better or worse, is likely going to have a really big impact on all of your lives and all of our lives in the county. I like to start these presentations with a couple of questions, just kind of so I know what I need to talk about a little bit. How many of you, before all of this came up, had heard of the Alachua County Comprehensive Plan? About half of you, maybe a little more. How many of you, before all of this started, had heard of Plum Creek Corporation? Almost half. Okay, that's not too bad. Plum Creek likes to start their presentations and their Envision Alachua process that they do by making a statement or asking the question, why here, why now? And then they go into their answer to that question. I want to give you a little bit different answer. I'm going to start really big and then we're going to focus in on what's happening here in Alachua County. But I want to put this in kind of a larger context. And I apologize to you. I see a few of you that I know have been to some of the previous presentations. You're going to have to listen to this again. But where this all really starts is with the Panama Canal. And it winds up here. And here's the connection. Some of you may be aware that the Panama Canal, right now, is being widened. It's being made larger. Right now, it's too small for the really big super tankers that are common now in world commerce to pass through. And so all the stuff that you all go into Walmart and buy, the cheap plastic stuff that comes from China and Southeast Asia, the really inexpensive stuff coming from Asia, to get to the East Coast, they have to stop on the West Coast. And they offload all their stuff, and they put it on trucks, and they put it on rails, and they distribute it all over the country that way. Because they can't get to the Panama Canal, not the really big ones. This expansion, the Panamax expansion, that's going on right now, and is almost finished. Within the next couple of years, it'll open. It's going to allow all the super tankers to bypass California, come on in into the Gulf of Mexico, and go up the Atlantic seaboard, and offload all their stuff from Asia directly into the ports. And of course, all the big players know this. All the port cities know this. Jacksonville stands to be one of the really, really big gainers in all this process. They're deepening and widening, as a lot of other ports and cities are doing as well, getting ready for this, because they're anticipating a huge expansion in the amount of imported stuff coming in, offloading in Jacksonville, and then being distributed on the truck and rail network from the East Coast to the West Coast. So all around Jacksonville, in a big arc, all the people with big chunks of land and near major roadways and near railroad corridors are getting ready. They're doing what land speculators do. If you're not familiar with that term, land speculation, you buy land cheap in big blocks where you think growth and development is going to happen. If you're right, you place your bet right, you win big. When the development comes your way, you value the land is much higher, you get it upzoned, you can sell it for 10 times what you paid for it. So all around Jacksonville, out along the I-10 corridor, up and down the I-95 corridor, US 301, the rail connectors out of Jacksonville, the big land speculators are getting ready for this. Plum Creek's not doing this just here. They have big developments up in the I-10 corridor as well and other areas where they're trying to do this. So their intention now, why here, why now, is because there's a railroad, a major railroad right over here. And there's a U.S. highway, of course, going by there, the state highway going east and west. And they think this area has the potential, at some point in the future, it's not going to happen overnight, but at some point in the future, because of those links, they're going to be able to have major warehousing and manufacturing facilities there. That's the game. And of course, all the landowners are, again, placing the same bet. It's not going to happen this far out anytime soon. But closer to Jacksonville, where the manufacturers, they want to be on the rail lines, they want to be on the highways, they want to get ready for all this expansion that's coming, and they're getting ready. So that's the big picture. That's the context. Plum Creek does not build things, and they'll acknowledge that. Okay, they mostly grow trees. Plum Creek is a real estate investment trust. It's a particular kind of corporation created by Congress, which allows people to invest in land and land holdings in real estate in a way that has tax advantages. And they're big. They're really big. They're the largest landowner in Alachua County. They're the largest landowner in the state of Florida. They're the largest landowner in America. They own a lot of land. They're very, very big, and people who invest their money with them. They're a publicly traded company. Okay, they're beholden to their shareholders, not anyone else. It's important to remember that. Okay, their allegiance is to the people who own stock in their company. They mostly grow trees. That's their niche. Some real estate investment trusts have malls. They specialize in malls or commercial centers. Plum Creek grows trees. They grow pine trees. That's what they're going to continue to do primarily. And in their huge holdings all over the country, they're identifying areas. We're continually looking for ways for certain chunks of land to, if they think they can make more money, they'll change it and do something else. They'll sell it for development. What's happening here in Alachua County? On most of their land, they're going to continue growing trees. But on the areas where they think they can make more money, like in the area radiating out from Hawthorne and closer to Gainesville, their intention is to upzone their land, parcel it out, sell it to developers. The developers will actually do the building. They don't do the building. So that's kind of the background. The comprehensive plan, the Alachua County Comprehensive Plan, basically is a way that the community can kind of predict and control and direct resources to where growth and development in the county are going to happen. If you choose to live in the cities because you like to live in the city, choose to live in the western suburbs because you want to live in the suburbia. If you choose to live in the country, as I do, you accept the inconveniences of that, but you do that because you want to live in the country. And one of the things that zoning and land use and the comprehensive plan does is it gives you some reassurances of stability. Things aren't going to just change overnight. You know, we have a plan. You know, the entire county is a very public process. It involves over countless meetings and elections, and we kind of set up this process where we think these are the areas where it makes the most sense to have growth. This is where the schools are. This is where the roads are. This is the high, dry land. This is where people have an expectation of growth. And then these are the areas in the county where it really doesn't make a lot of sense. This is more rural, it's agricultural, there are farms, maybe a lot of wetlands, there may be environmentally significant areas. So the future land use map of the comp plan, at the heart of it, is to kind of step back and use our judgment and decide these are the areas where we generally want to encourage growth and these are areas where we don't. And in so doing, what the comp plan does is it establishes land use categories. Everyone's land is called something on the map. And all of Plum Creek's land, all 65,000 acres of it, is in a category called rural agriculture. Most of you probably live in rural ag land. I do. Live near Macon. Rural ag gives the owners certain rights. If your land is in a different category, say residential or commercial, you have different rights to go along with that. Rural ag entitles you to build one home on every 5 acres that you own. So theoretically, if you have 100 acres house, you can build 20 homes over there. By right now, you can build in the rural ag area. Plum Creek, that's what they have on all their land. 1 for 5, they have no commercial rights. They bought big, wet, remote timberland. They bought it cheap, they're growing pine trees, and they don't pay very much in the way of taxes on it. In fact, last year, Plum Creek didn't pay any taxes. Interesting fact, the national level, they paid no taxes. They pay property taxes here in Alachua County, but not a lot because it all has an agricultural assessment. But federally, they did not pay a tax. So that's what they have. That's what the rights are right now. Alachua County also has wetland protections, environmental protections that are a little stricter than the state standards. I'm going to get into that here in just a second. Now, what they want to change, let me go to the map here for a second. I want to show you all this. I hope y'all can see that. You don't need to see the details to get this. This is a map of Alachua County. And what it does is it shows where the cities are, in kind of the darker tan color. It shows where the dry land is, and all that blue is wetlands. It's either standing water or wetlands, and then there's a slightly different color that is FEMA 100-year floodplain. Now, when you look at this map, it's really striking. If you've never seen this map of Alachua County, something really jumps out. There's a clear pattern here. You've got this whole big triangular area here where 95% of the population is. In this big triangular area from Gainesville leading up to the northwest and the southwest. 95% of the people live there. It's all high and dry. No accident. Where people live. It's where the best agriculture has always been. It's where the development and growth is happening. And then this swath over here, all along this kind of Payne's Prairie, wrapping around up here on up into the northern part of the county, good ag land up there in the north, but you can see it gets wetter as you go east. And all that land has a clay layer under it, essentially at varying depths and varying distances down to the ground. That means when it rains on it, the water doesn't soak in. Western part of the county, it's all sand, lime rock, and rains out there, it goes straight into the ground. Out here, it's got nowhere to go. It puddles up. It drains into the lakes. All the lakes are over here. It runs into some of our rivers and it goes out of the county. And so during the wet season, all across this part of the area, that's when it starts looking like that. During the rainy season, you can go out into the woods, these wet pine flatwoods around here, and there'll be huge areas. If you were to fly over in an airplane and look down in the middle of the summer, you see the sun reflecting back at you, as you fly over the land. There's like that much water over just huge areas. Because the water's got nowhere to go. Wet flatwoods. Very, very poorly drained. Now, the Alachua County Comprehensive Plan did not create that reality, but it acknowledges that reality when we do our planning. The comp plan helps to tell us where do we want the growth of the next 50 years to happen, and where do we not want to try to put homes. What jumps out at you is the last place in the county where you want to build a new city. Right here. It's very wet. To build anything on the scale that Plum Creek wants to do, they're going to have to do some dredging, and some draining, and some diking, and construction of wetlands that we thought we all kind of knew better than now, but it still goes on quite a bit. The comp plan did not arbitrarily choose these areas as rural ag. It just makes sense. You all have to deal with the consequences of building out of these areas and then trying to provide services to it. So, here's what Plum Creek wants to do. Here's what they want to change. You go to the next slide, please, Kyle. This next slide is going to kind of zoom in on this eastern third of the county. It takes a few seconds. Big maps. Okay. Oriented here. Here's Moose Lake. Moose Lake. Here. Right there. And here's Gainesville. And this takes the same map with the wetlands and everything on it. And then also puts Plum Creek's on it. So the kind of darker, I don't know what color that is, reddish or something, color vision, but you can see you can see where the outlines are. And the areas that are that color are the dry parts all the blue that's interwoven all over it, those are the wetlands. You can see, pointer or something. Here we go. That's how it works. I want to quickly kind of walk you through where Plum Creek's lands are. You see this big chunk here? That's north of Gainesville. That's the Murphy Wellfield area. Okay, everything below my finger, this whole area here, has a permanent conservation easement on it. They sold the rights to the city, Plum Creek did, or the predecessor company did. Sold all those rights, it can never be developed. They're going to practice timber. There's a little piece of here on top, which again is extremely wet, that they haven't sold the development rights to yet. Same goes over here. This big area up here, this is called the Northeast Flatwoods, and in the county's comp plan. Nothing there, extremely wet. As you can see, the little spots where there's actually dry land, very small, very disconnected. I'm going to come back to why that's so important. Before we come to the main area here, I want you to walk through the rest of this right quick. This is another big area down here east of La Colusa Lake. As you can see, it's almost all wetland. There are big chunks of it, there are scattered chunks of it. There are chunks, a significant amount of dry land there, but it's islands here and there in the wetlands. There's a little piece here on Holden Park Road that's actually a little bit higher in drive before you leave the county. Don't get familiar with that area. You see all this area down here? All of this, south of Hawthorne Road, all of this land owned by Plum Creek, like this area up here, all the development rights were sold to the state years ago. The company that used to own all this land was called Georgia Pacific Corporation. My father worked for Georgia Pacific most of his life. I grew up in the industry. And they sold this land to Plum Creek 10, 15 years ago. They bought all the Georgia Pacific holdings. So all this land can never be developed. They still own it, they grow timber on it, they can practice certain kinds of agriculture, but they can't develop it. So that just leaves this area where they're proposing to build their city. Before we zoom in on that. Okay. So this area is what they want to do. And right now, under the current comprehensive plan, in this area where they want to build, they're entitled to about 2,500 homes. Maybe a little more, they get some density bonuses. About 2,500 homes. Theoretically, they could build tomorrow by right. Now, there's some problems with them actually doing that, but that's the theoretical right. 2,500 homes, they have no commercial rights. What they're asking for in this area is the right to build 10,500 homes. So that's 8,000 more homes. They also want 15.5 million square feet of commercial. And just to give you a sense of how big that is, because that's kind of a weird number, the Oaks Mall is about 1 million square feet. So the equivalent of about 15 Oaks Malls worth of commercial and industrial and warehousing space is what they want to put in that development area. Now, in order to do this, they need to relax or weaken some of the county's environmental protections. There are a lot of constraints on development in there because it's so fragmented by wetlands. So they want to set aside the county's wetland protections and go with the more lenient state standards. And there are differences, like for instance, under the county's comp plan, all wetlands receive some degree of protection. Under state standards, anything under 1/2 acre, it's like it doesn't exist. You can destroy it by right. Under the state standards, you can destroy any wetland as long as you do what's called mitigation, which just means you can fill in 5 acres of wetlands here, but you have to dig a hole of equivalent size somewhere else to hold water. So it's kind of an offset. You can destroy here, you got to create somewhere else. The wetland mitigation has a very spotty history in the state of Florida. They're pretty good at figuring out what size hole they need to dig, but they're not very good, we are not very good at actually recreating wetlands and wetland functions, particularly the biological aspects of them. Just because you dig a hole doesn't mean everything shows up. It's got to be in the right place, it needs time, a lot of other things have to go into that. So that's what they want to do. They want to substitute the state standards, which would allow them to do a lot more mucking around in there in order to consolidate drier areas. And then they'll do their draining. They'll have to do a lot of draining. They're allowed to use existing wetlands as stormwater discharge areas. So by the time they're done, they can, of all their land, even though it's all wet, this is the driest part. So they think this is where we can do our development. You know, as long as we're allowed to do what we want to do, we can do this. In exchange for this, what they're offering the county is to put these areas I told you about earlier, this area, and this little place here, and this area down here, and this little area here. See, which are almost entirely lit. What they're offering to the county is to put all of that into a conservation easement like the rest of it, like the areas down here where they have conservation easements. So they keep all this and keep growing trees, but in this area and in this area primarily, no development would happen. Permanent conservation easement, they go on growing trees. So that's what they're offering to the county in exchange for this enormous increase in their development rights here. Remember that, and we'll come back to that. Because the real question is the county actually getting anything as part of this deal for what we're giving up? I want to talk about stand by our plans group. Some of you are wearing shirts. The way these development things usually happen, if you've ever gone through any of this, you know that development in Florida is generally on rails, development approvals. It's on greased rails. There's a process, and the professionals know how to work it. I've been watching as a commissioner now for 14 years, and the developer knows the process. They have their hired experts, they have their attorneys, they work with staff, they come through. This thing zooms through. They get to the hearings. Nobody in the community really knows what's going on usually. You usually find out about these things after it's done, because who reads those legal notices in the paper? I don't read them. Nobody reads those, but that's telling you what's going to happen. And if you are determined, you can find out what's going on, and you can come to the meetings, and you can object, and people sometimes do, but there are rules governing how you can object. It's a complicated process. Development happens, it's very heavily stacked in favor of the people who want to do the developing, and usually it happens in an area which has a big impact on the people surrounding it. They find out about it later, and they're all left wondering what just happened. It's too late. Some of us have been watching this issue for a long time. We know Plum Creek's the biggest landowner in the state. We know they do this in other parts of the country and other parts of the state. They've done similar things. Knew that this was coming. We've been watching this for a long time, and really felt like this is too big. It's too consequential. It's going to have too big a permanent effect on Alachua County to let it happen that way. Okay, the way to do this really is to get out ahead of it before it comes to the county commission, before it's too late, and make sure that people who are affected, which is all of you, know about this, know about it in advance, have a good source of information, a place you can go to find out what's going to happen. You can organize yourself if you want to, and you can even have a voice in electing the people who are going to make the decisions here, because this is a long process. They won't be coming to the county commission until next year. So if this is important to you, you need to know where your elected representatives and candidates stand on this issue. And doing this in advance, the way we have done, by organizing this group, it's open to everyone. We have a website, we have a Facebook page. We're trying to do two things. One, make sure people get the information. We have a lot of links to documents, to Plum Creek's application. We're very fact-driven and open, standing offer to Plum Creek. If they catch us in any factual misstatement, on our Facebook page, on our website, anything that we say or do in these presentations, let us know. We'll correct it. Because we think the information speaks for itself. I've been approached by them twice. Both times, I thought it was a pretty lame objection they were making, but we accommodated. So I just want you to know, we exist to put the information in front of people from a perspective we think is more fair. Plum Creek has been at this for 3 years. For 3 years, they've been working in this community, spending a lot of money, putting a lot of people on the payroll, telling their side of the story, and trying to create a political climate where this would go through easily, because they've had some bad experiences in other states. People get very upset about the things that they do. They've had problems with approvals. In Maine, a big development they did went all the way to the state Supreme Court. So they've learned a few things, and they need to approach this carefully. So they've been at it for 3 years, telling their side of the story. We want to tell the other side of the story, and we're not anti-Plum Creek. We're not trying to run them out of the county. We're not planning to throw ourselves in front of bulldozers, although that may come back, but that's not the plan. Be all right. We welcome them here in the community as a corporation. We want them to go and grow on trees. That's what they do. That's what they did. They bought the land. We want them to be that kind of corporate neighbor. We don't oppose them. We support the county's comprehensive plan. That's the name of the group, Stand By Our Plan, refers to the comprehensive plan. It's the public's plan. They have a private version that applies only to their lands. We support the public process. It's a plan that has undergone a lot of debate and scrutiny and compromise and election cycles and lawsuits, and it's as close as we're ever going to get to a collective public vision of what we want to do with our community. Not everyone agrees with everything, and it's definitely not what it would be if I was in charge. And all of you probably have your own ideas, but the point is it's a public process. Thousands of hearings and again, elections, campaigns that have been based on issues having to do with the comp plan. It's our public process for deciding how the community is going to grow and develop, and we support that. We welcome Plum Creek. They can do whatever they want with their land. We're just asking that they follow the same rules that everyone else has to follow, every other developer has to follow, rather than asking for their own set of rules. So that's Stand By Our Plan. Please, if you haven't already, visit our website, learn a little bit more about us. We'd love to have you help us. So to kind of summarize this, the process that Plum Creek went through, their envision electoral process. Did any of you go to any of those meetings? You haven't been to an envision electoral meeting? Okay. I haven't been to one. You need to go, but I haven't been. They essentially did a kind of miniature version of what the county did with this comprehensive plan. A couple of differences. In the county process, anyone can come and participate. In their process, they picked the people who would be on their task force, and they picked them very carefully. Secondly, the county comp plan looks at the entire county, takes in all the interest groups, all the different cities, the developers, the environmentalists, the people in the city, the people in the country. It looks at everybody and tries to find some kind of balance. Plum Creek's process only looked at their piece of the land, their piece of the county, their section of the land. And the question they asked people was, kind of a loaded question, what's the best way for us to build a city on our land? That's basically the question they asked. It was never really on the table that they were going to just follow the county's comp plan. They wanted to develop and to provide the appearance of having a compromise, public input thing. They got everyone to kind of say, what are your hopes and dreams for the community? How should we develop our land? We think the comp plan asks the more appropriate question, the broader context question. Where do we want to encourage growth in the county? That's the broader question. And ironically, their process that they went through that came up with their, supposedly led to the development of their plan, again, it was like the county comp plan process. The county comp plan process went through that same thing, where they say, these are the areas that it's best to have development. These are the areas we're going to set aside as conservation. Yeah, these are going to be the rules here, these are the rules here. That's what Plum Creek did. The county did the same thing, but part of what came out of that was the place that we don't want to build, the place that should remain in agriculture and rural, low-density development, just happened to be all of their land. Because it makes sense. They bought, again, cheap, wet, remote timberland. It doesn't make sense to develop there. Until we look like Miami-Dade County, there's no land left. This is the last area you go to begin building. So their process, again, used at the county-wide level, brings us to the conclusion that their land they should keep growing trees on it. That's not the answer they wanted, of course. Take a little bit about sprawl. Everyone probably heard the word sprawl. I'll tell you a little bit why we think this is a bad place to do development. I've already told you about the wetlands and all the problems that you're going to have in the larger area if you start mucking around in there on the scale they want to do that. Sprawl basically refers to a leapfrog development. The comp plan embraces the idea that we're going to grow, okay, but you want to kind of grow in cities and in towns and adjacent to towns, so there's this kind of orderly expansion, growth of the developed urbanizing areas. And a lot of advantages to that. Again, it gives that stability. If you choose to buy in an area, you kind of know what's coming. You buy into a certain lifestyle, you can predict what things are going to be like 20 years from now. If you buy land out here in the Tower Road corridor, you know you're going to have subdivisions around you for too much longer. That's where growth's happening. You buy land out here, about 5 acres out here, 10 acres out here, and you want to live out here, you have a reasonable expectation it's going to remain rural, at least for your lifetime. So sprawl takes that away. Sprawl is expensive to taxpayers. Because if you build a subdivision out here in the middle of nowhere, all of us still have to pay to get the police out there when there's a problem, trash has to be picked up, fire has to respond, you need school capacity, all the things that are public services are much more expensive on a per capita basis with sprawl development. It's more expensive inherently. That's why communities all over the country, all pretty much, at least in theory, embrace the idea of containing sprawl and encouraging more compact growth and development. It's better for cities, it's better for the countryside, it's cheaper for everyone, for taxpayers. So it also, sprawl hurts cities, because it draws growth and development and investment out of these urbanizing, growing areas and puts it out into the community. And so the resources that the government has to invest in building roads and parks and maintaining things, in Florida, we're just in this race to keep up with the growth, and we're always getting further and further behind. How many of you were living in this community before I-75 was built? Y'all remember what Gainesville was like about 20 years ago?
Yes.
Ghost town. Boarded up. You know, you just didn't go down there. County government was down there. City government was down there. There was not a whole lot else going on. A big part of that was the westward sprawl that resulted from I-75 going in where it did. A lot of growth and development jumped out into that area, up and down that corridor. There was kind of a gap left in between, which was eventually filled in because you couldn't. It was dry land, you could fill it in. It's not the case here. You got a lake in the way. I'll get back to that. It leapfrogged out there and then kind of just kept going. And it's out to Jonesville now. And it's getting to the point now where, because of the comp plan, putting some constraints on that, and the fact that you're too far away now from jobs and things, and people are getting tired of the commute, we're getting to that point in this county, people are coming back downtown now. Okay, the city is enjoying kind of a renaissance downtown. A lot of growth and development happening there. A lot of students, the student housing was kind of going out west, it's coming back downtown now. You see businesses pop up again, restaurants. It looks good downtown. If you haven't been down there in a while to have a meal, I encourage you to go. Those good things that are happening, it took a while to rebound from the effects of that westward sprawl. We think that what happens, if Plum Creek is successful in doing what they're proposing, it's going to have the same effect. No reason why it wouldn't. Sprawl always hurts cities the most, and that includes East Gainesville. Cities are going to be affected by this, not just Gainesville, but almost all of them. The only potential beneficiary would probably be Hawthorne. We'll talk about that in a little bit too, because it's relatively close to Hawthorne. So they would have probably enjoy some growth and development in the city rather than at their expense. So it's basically the textbook sprawl, and we think that's bad for the community. That's why the comp plan doesn't allow for that kind of growth and development. That is the key element of the comp plan, is designating where the appropriate areas for growth and development are. And this completely turns that on its head. All the good planning concepts that Plum Creek has come up with. And they brag, rightly, about the things they're saying they're going to do with their development, like cluster development, the rights on a certain area and set aside other areas for conservation. Mix of uses, houses and shops and places, which is increasingly very popular. People like to be able to walk to things. Higher densities, so you don't take up as much of the land. A lot of people increasingly don't want yards. That's kind of the trend in development, in the development circles all over the country right now. It's back towards this more traditional style of development, more of a mix of uses, smaller lots. All these things are promising to do. They're already in the comprehensive plan. It's not that they're bad planning concepts, it's that they're not bringing anything new to the table. It's important to recognize that. When you listen to them talking about the wonderful things they're proposing to do in the development area, if they were doing it out west, they'd be required to do those things. There's nothing new in what they have proposed. It's not already in common, not a single significant policy. A couple more points, then I'm going to talk about some of the misconceptions that have arisen around this, and then I'm going to shut up and take some questions. Here's an important thing to remember. Why is this so complicated? This area, where you can see is their land, but also look at all these other areas that are in white. There are parcels in here, they're mixed in, they're surrounding it, they're going up and down the major roadways. Those are all owned by other people who are going to have an expectation to the same rights that we're giving to Plum Creek. As the area starts to grow and develop, all the land around there is going to want in too. They're going to join in on Gold Rush. And piggyback development, and that's not going to happen according to Plum Creek's plan. They're going to be following some other plan, their own ambitions. They certainly have a right to ask for the exceptions that Plum Creek is getting now. And once this starts to build and grow and develop and becomes a city, well then logically, okay, we might as well let it go. It's a city now, so we can keep building. So it's important to remember we're not just talking about Plum Creek, but all the other piggyback development that will happen as well and won't be as controlled. There's another important thing to remember. If they put a conservation easement on the areas they're calling conservation, you know, these areas now, the areas where they say they're going to set aside this area and this area, okay, that's protected. That can't change once they sign the document saying you can't build and develop. The area that they want to develop, any of that can be changed at any time by any future county commission with 3 votes. You need to remember that, because they're acting like this is our 50-year vision. They're not going to develop. They will piecemeal this. They will sell it to other developers. All of them will have their own plans, their own ambitions, and they'll be back down in front of the county commission 10 years from now, 15 years from now, asking for changes. And why would the county commission deny it? 3 votes is all it takes to change any of that. So all the talk about the conditions that are going to go into that area really don't amount to anything. Once we grant the rights for 10,500 homes to 15 million square feet of commercial, anything can happen. I'll say this too. This is kind of a footnote. There's one part of this that the group, Stand By Our Plan, not everyone may agree with us on this. There's one part of this that we actually don't think is a bad idea. This little piece here, kind of wrapping around Hawthorne. It's adjacent to the city of Baltimore. It's in their annexation reserve. It's kind of like part of that area outside the city that is slated for future growth. It's relatively high and dry, at least the part north of Hawthorne Road. It's not county designated strategic ecosystem, which I haven't talked about yet, but that means it really doesn't have very much environmental significance. It's kind of isolated from most of the rest of what's going on here. And it's mostly cow pasture now, cow pasture and some tree farms. So we don't object to that part. We thought if they want to develop, according to the comp plan, if they want to get the more higher development rights, then they can either do that by annexing into Hawthorne and letting Hawthorne develop it, or they can do it with the county first and then the city should annex it. As a group, we're okay with that part being developed close to what Plum Creek is proposing, although we still think the environmental protections need to remain because there's some wetlands on this area, particularly south of Hawthorne Road, that are very important. But we don't object to that part. And that's what Hawthorne is promising, the bulk of the job is to be available to everyone. We want to do some ag-related stuff over in the southwestern part of that too, but the kind of manufacturing type promise they're making, that we're going to have these big paying jobs for everyone that never seem to materialize, it's in the part near Hawthorne because that's where the railroad is. And that's where the 2 major highways connect. So we're okay with that part. Not against all of it. All right. Again, Plum Creek's been at this for 3 years, and for 2.5 years, they had the field to themselves. No one was saying anything different. The media certainly weren't being critical or doing any reports. They were allowed to say whatever they want to kind of establish this mythology around what they're proposing. You know, land speculators have an uphill battle if they come into a community and say, We want to buy all this land, we want the public to give us all these higher development rights, and then we're going to sell it, and then we're out of here. You can't say that. Okay? Part of the vision and natural process was to ask of the community, what are your hopes and dreams? What do you want to see happen? And have brought in professional facilitators and appointed this task force. And of course, every community is going to say the same thing. We want good paying, blue collar jobs, but we want to maintain the character of our community. We want economic growth and development, expansion of the tax base, but we want to protect the environment. Everyone wants the same thing. So they create this laundry list, and then their strategy, their corporate strategy, and they brag about this to their shareholders. Their strategy is, and then they turn around and say, okay, here's our plan, it will give you all of these things. They can't deliver on any of it. Again, they acknowledge they don't develop, they don't build, they don't do any of these things. They're just like developers in this county are everywhere else in the county. They're just bigger. They're proposing to do the same things, but they have budget to tell people that they're doing something other than speculating in land. And so this process was set up. And this task force, I don't slam any of them individually or personally, because they're good people. They were chosen deliberately by Plum Creek. They never disagree about anything. None of them have ever seriously objected to anything Plum Creek is proposing. It's not the kind of meeting where they were tasked with coming up with the plan. They don't make motions. They don't vote on anything. They just kind of, Plum Creek says, these are the things that we're dealing with. What would you like to see? And everyone kind of has their input. And then the next meeting, they come back and kind of summarize, this is what you said you wanted. And they came up with a nice document, it was a nice effort, but I think it's important to remember this is not really a synopsis of what the county wants, or the people of the community want. It's a public relations initiative. So I'm just going to leave it at that. A fine group of people. They never seem to disagree on anything, which I don't understand that. I guarantee if all of us sit down around our table and start to come up with what we want to see happen for the next 50 years, there'll be a lot of debate, a lot of controversy. That's what I've been living for the last 15 years, basically, is that. So that's that. So this idea that envisional actually is somehow the community telling Plum Creek what it wants. Here's the vision, we're going to deliver it. Okay, it is what it is. Now here's the way that Plum Creek has gotten the interest of a lot of environmentalists. There are some good ideas that are proposing. And in other parts of the country, in the state, these good deals have been done between large landowners and government, where they can have more rights given to them in one place as long as they set aside and protect other areas. That's kind of what they're proposing to do here. They're going to develop the heck out of this area, a whole lot of new rights, and then they're offering to protect these other two areas, set them aside forever. There's a couple problems with that scenario here. And it's like 20,000 acres. Well, if they use the claim, they're going to put 87% of the land into conservation. Now, it's a little misleading because almost 40% of the land is already under permanent conservation easement and can't be developed, right? So again, we're sold by the previous owner to the state. So 40% of it's undeveloped. Of what remains, the county comprehensive plan, if it's strategic ecosystem, meaning it's really environmentally significant, and all of Plum Creek's land is strategic ecosystem, except for that beach near Hallway. You got to additionally set aside up to half of the uplands, the most environmentally significant part. Usually they create big buffers to the wetlands and make sure there are corridors for the wildlife. Between a third and a half of their land, Plum Creek saying one thing, county staff saying another thing, we'll eventually kind of hire our own experts and come up with a compromise, I guess. But between a third and a half of it is wetland or wetland buffer or 100-year floodplain. That's also virtually undeveloped without great expense and effort. So when you add all these things together, the fact that 40% of it is already protected forever, of what remains up to a half of it is wetlands and can't really be developed, even if there were no wetland protections, you just can't build a little swamp. It's hard to do, it's expensive. And the remaining protections in the and strategic ecosystems, if you add all that together, you end up with about the same amount of land set aside. In other words, that promise to put all that land into conservation is what they're going to have to do anyway. Period. If they develop, if there was no comprehensive plan, that's the amount of land that's actually going to be off the table for development. And recently, really, talking to natural resource professionals in the community and asking them about these areas, and I'm familiar with some of them. The big two chunks they want to put in conservation. I asked to blow up maps and parcel ownership information, where the roads are, to try to get a sense of whether or not these areas they're promising to protect forever, that's the carrot, could ever actually be developed. Because if they can't be developed, we're not getting anything, all right? Not actually getting anything from them. If they're offering to not develop land they know they can never develop, if we give them all these new development rights, then we've been sucked. The land is virtually undeveloped. It's broken up into different parcels. Quickly walk through a few of the facts and get with me afterwards if you want to know more detail on this. It gets complicated and hurry. But basically, all the policies in the comp plan, just because you have those theoretical development rights, like that area up there, Northeast Flat, about 7,000 acres. You do the math, that's 200, that's 1,400 homes they could theoretically develop there. But they're not entitled to that if the other comp plan policies don't permit the development to happen. If you can't build in wetlands, then you can't put homes there. You're not entitled to that. So what that means is, and it's broken out into 100 and something individual parcels Plum Creek owns, and you do them on a parcel by parcel basis. A lot of them in those two areas are almost entirely wetland. Nothing could go there. Or maybe a little piece of land over in the corner, but it makes no economic sense to try to build a county standard paved road, which you're required to do, through the swamps and wetlands to build 5 homes on a little chunk of land. It will never happen. And privately, there's no market for this kind of land anyway. There's no market for that kind of development. There's an ample abundance of 5-acre parcels out on the western part of the county which nobody's buying anymore because the trend is away from that kind of growth and development. There's no market for it. It can't be developed. On what remains, you have to have at least a full acre to put a septic tank in. Okay? Under county standards, you have to have a full acre to put a septic. You start adding all these things together, very little of this could ever be developed. There's a little area right here, Holden Park Road. I drove it earlier today. You look at it, Holden Park Road is right here. You see how it's kind of, it's the biggest chunk of actual land. Okay? There you could probably have a subdivision. There are a few other places, there's no road access up here in any of the areas that are dry. They're all isolated. And I hit Plum Creek with this last time you came to see me. They come see all the county commissioners regularly. It's a courtesy call. It's polite. And I put that in front of them. I said, look, my analysis shows, and I took out the maps, that you guys are bluffing. You can't actually develop this area. You're offering to give up the development rights. What are we really getting? And they really didn't disagree with me, didn't dispute it, had no counter argument, waiting to see what they come back with. That's important, because again, if that land is undevelopable, the public's not getting anything for what we're giving up. I talked about the 87%, that's a myth. Conservation, that's important to remember too. When they say conservation, the 87%, most people think conservation plus forests. I can go hike there. Go with my kids, do some bird watching, there'll be trails. Okay, that's not what Plum Creek means by conservation. They have a different definition. Okay, they're going to do tree farming. Okay, they're tree farmers. Nothing wrong with that. I grew up again in the industry. I know a little bit about forestry. You need trees, you need paper. Nothing wrong with people growing trees, but it's important to understand that's what they're talking about. Tree farms, they clear cut vast areas. You can drive around the county now and see where they've been at work. They trench the ground, they plant genetically selected trees that are pretty much alike in little tight little rows. They get up to about 20 years old, they do a thinning. They're not going to grow more than 25 years. It's more like a cornfield than a forest. So just bear in mind, that's what they mean when they say conservation. It's debatable whether or not that's really helping the environment. And that's what they're promising, permanently protect and conservation. They've been saying some really remarkable things lately about how their development is going to have what they're calling a new water ethic. This is great, they borrowed that term. And it's true, we're relying on it. Which, we all consume too much water. And they're insisting that they're going to, even though they're not going to do the development, they're going to have these standards in place. They're going to make it a lot more resource efficient than the development which would otherwise happen elsewhere in the county. They're going to conserve more water. And the primary way they're promising to do that is by prohibiting people from having grass and watering it. So you can't water your grass. That's illegal. Okay, you can water your grass. On a practical basis, it's completely unenforceable. The water management districts do have the authority in a crisis, which they designate, to restrict irrigation of lawns. We don't really. There's a very loose one in effect, even at the worst. No one ever got fined, no one ever got a ticket. But the point is, almost the entire time, you can water whatever you want. There's no county standard that says you can't water your grass. It's unenforceable. So we're not sure where they're getting that, other than they're going to encourage people to be good people. And you can do that in the western part of the county if you wanted to. So the promise that they're going to be more resource efficient than the comp plan would have, no. It's just all. I want to very quickly touch on jobs for East Gainesville. I think it's a little silly. Did I put that? Yeah, it's in here. Again, coming back to it not being very good public relations to come into a community and say, we want you to upzone all our land, we're going to sell it, and we're out of here. You have to have some other way to sell it, not in rent, unfortunately. There's a map that Plum Creek produced, which plots in big circles on the county and shows how far things are from each other. Their promise to the people of East Gainesville is this is going to be their salvation. They're going to get all these jobs for people in East Gainesville. East Gainesville is further from the main area where they want to do the blue-collar jobs, this area here around Hawthorne. It's further from East Gainesville than Jonesville is. Where Jonesville is in town of Tioga, way out in the Indian River. The very closest point of their land, which is where they want to do some kind of ag research type thing, certainly would be blue-collar jobs here. The very closest part is further away from East Gainesville than I-75. You get a sense of scale. So, if all the growth and development that has happened in Gainesville, up and down the I-75 corridor, and the industrial manufacturing stuff that's going on in Progress Corporate Park up the road towards Alachua, which is also closer, of all that stuff that's been going on for 10 or 15 years, did nothing for Gainesville. Why would this? We really think that it's not up to us to demonstrate why their argument makes no sense. It's up to them to demonstrate to the community how it can possibly work. And we challenged for them over and over on this. How? How is it going to create jobs in East Gainesville? Connect the dots. And they can't. It doesn't make any sense. It's way far away. At least the stuff that's happening out west, is separated from them by streets, people, shops, and things. Here's what separates East Gainesville from all the stuff that's going to happen. There's only two ways by it. There's only two ways. I forgot to mention that. What they're proposing development, it would be about 30,000 people, about 30,000 new cars. They're not proposing to build any new roads. Well, they don't do it like that. It's important to remember, if you live out here, you know there's only two ways in and out. And it's separated by this big lake and all these really bad areas. I mean, swamp. But somehow the benefits are going to leap out into East Gainesville and benefit people of East Gainesville. And recently, they put some people on payroll. I'm going to be frank about that. They've hired some people to say certain things. We've been accused of reverse environmental racism. We see this as a kind of sign of desperation. You say things like that when you've got nothing else to say. We think it's incumbent on Plum Creek to demonstrate how they're going to help East Gainesville, other than the people that they've hired or that fire unless they get their approvals. We don't think they have the leg to stand on. The best hope for East Gainesville is the continuing growth and renaissance of downtown Gainesville. The city's coming back. The city core is coming back. And those benefits are spreading slowly in all directions. We've got Publix on North Main now. We've got a Walmart on Waldo Road. You've got things happening in that area again. And East Gainesville and downtown are essentially the same. It's only 15 blocks away. So it's right there. Whatever helps downtown Gainesville, that's the best cover for East Gainesville. And Plum Creek, for all the reasons I described before, will not help downtown Gainesville. So it's not that they're not going to help East Gainesville. We think what they're proposing would hurt East Gainesville. And there's a lot of history and a lot of analysis that backs that up. So that's enough East Gainesville. Okay, I want to close with this. Can you go to the quote? So there's been a lot of talk about Plum Creek. Again, they spent money, they made some generous contributions to local groups. They've talked about how they're going to do job training and education and all these things, which they don't do. But they've talked a lot about that. And they say they're in for the long haul. It's a 50-year plan. So it's important for the community to know what are their intentions. What are their long-term intentions? They're saying one thing in this community. I'm going to read that right quick. This is from the CEO of Plum Creek, the boss of all the people here locally. And this is what he told investors in a story earlier this year about what their intentions are. I'm going to read it if somebody can't make it out from the back. I love reading this in. One of the key initiatives for the company over the past several years has been the entitlement of our most valuable development properties. Entitlement means zoning and land use rights. For a piece of ag land, by one action of the county commission, you can quintuple its value by giving it a new zone. Entitlement, that's what they're doing right now. Rick Holly, told analysts in Atlanta on April 28th, through the pursuit of these entitlements, we change the very nature of those assets and create long-term value for shareholders. We do not intend to pursue vertical development. It's code speak for development. We're not going to build anything. We're not going to pursue vertical development or invest a significant amount of capital into these properties. Rather, our strategy is to spend time and effort, which is what they're doing, to move these properties up the value chain through entitlement and then capture that value. In other words, sell it. I would also say that Plum Creek's largest development opportunity right now is in Lafayette County, Florida. This is what he's telling people in Georgia. And if you want to go to the source for it, Henry, you can read the entire article. It's a direct quote. So it's right there. It's in black and white. It's quite clear what the intention is, in their own words. They want to, this is a long-term plan. They're going to keep growing trees for now, but while the economy is weak, the opportunity is there, they want to get all these entitlements given to them, and then over time, they will sell off pieces of it, as the market dictates, and someone else will build and develop it. They don't do any of this. They're going to get those zones, and then they're out of the picture. So, all their good works in the community need to be taken, you need to keep that in the back of your mind. The money they're spending is to ultimately increase shareholder value, and that is it. It's not that they're bad people, but that's what they do. They're a corporation. So that kind of rounds it out. I want to quickly say a few words about the process that's about to happen now, and then I'll take questions as long as you want to ask them. The county commission decides whether or not to amend the comprehensive plan. That's what they're doing. They're amending the comprehensive plan. This is unlike any other amendment in history of the comprehensive plan. They really want to carve out a different plan for their own area. Like upwards of 100 actual changes. I just mentioned a few. I mentioned the biggies. They basically want their own plan for their land and no one else. That, and they're doing it kind of in mass, we're bringing it all at the same time. The county commission votes on that. The county commission, there's a process. It goes to the planning commission first, which is Citizen Advisory Committee. It's like a preview. You can go to that if you want to listen to it and see what's coming. Then it goes to the state for review. And the state, this state government anyway, waves it right through. And then it comes back to us in a couple of months. After that, for sometime next year, this will make it to the county commission. And then we will have public hearings. And Plum Creek will come make their presentation, and staff will give their analysis and their recommendation. They haven't done yet, we're still analyzing it all. And then we'll take questions and answers from the public. The county commission will debate it like anything else and vote up and down. And there are no constraints. We can deny this without explanation. We can approve it with changes, or we can adopt it as proposed. Pure democracy. No legal constraints here. So that's what's going to happen. The big meetings are going to be next year. But one of the goals of Stand By Our Plan has been to make sure, again, in advance, while you can still do something about it, make sure the community understands what's coming. And the county commission is going to decide, and we have worked as hard as we could to make this a campaign subject. It's appropriate. Every candidate, every elected official should be out here talking to people, telling you what they think about what's coming. It's the important topic of the day on the campaign trail and in this community. We all need to be talking about it. So this election is very rapidly becoming a referendum on Plum Creek's proposal. That's what we want to make it. It should be. It should work that way. You have 2 open seats, 2 races that are happening in the county commission this year. You've got 2 candidates in each race, and they have differences of opinion. You have choices, which is what it's all about. It's not my job to tell you who to vote for, but know that you need to do your research because you have candidates on different sides of this issue. Stand By Our Plan has the candidates' own word. We sent questionnaires to all of them. Chamber of Commerce did the same thing. We published their answers on our website. That's it. No commentary. We just give you the answers. These are the positions the candidates have taken on Plum Creek. You can pick up your own mind. We've tried to engage every elected official and every candidate. We've approached them all. We've invited them all to come to our meetings. We've invited them all to come to our public hearings like this. Everyone's welcome. A couple of them keep coming to our meetings. And the others never do, so you can draw your own conclusions. But you've got a couple of candidates here tonight. I'd be happy to talk to you if you want to talk to them later, I'm sure. That's it, other than to say that if the county commission next year, I think there's a good chance of this, ultimately a majority doesn't approve what Plum Creek's proposing, chances are they just withdraw their application and wait for it to be voted down. And they've actually been pretty blunt about, we'll just wait you out. They're a big business. They're going to be here for a long time. And their thinking on this is that if this county commission does the unthinkable and tells us no, then we'll just wait 2 years and try again. We're not going anywhere. Well, this group, Stand By Our Plan, is not going anywhere either. We'll go into dormancy in 2 years from now, in the next election cycle, to make sure everyone knows where the candidates stand on this issue. This is going to be a big campaign topic indefinitely. So if we win this round, it doesn't go away. It'll be back. Ultimately, what we think ought to happen is that the most important areas for conservation for public use are liable. Put them into permanent conservation. Plum Creek has already sold some of its lands to both the state and to Alachua County. They have a local conservation land conservation program. You put it in public ownership. That's how you protect them through the market. You don't need to buy all of it. A lot of their land, again, is undeveloped. The areas that can be developed that have the greatest environmental significance, we think either the county through its land conservation program, which is we're going to try to renew in 2016. There's also a state land conservation referendum on the ballot this year. Going to produce a lot of new money for land conservation. We think we need to deal with Plum Creek and buy the most important lands.